All right, fight fans, get ready for this deep dive because we're heading straight into UFC 312. You sent over some predictions, and this model, Tajikbay, is giving us some seriously interesting stuff. It's not just picking winners, it's finding like these hidden edges where the odds makers might be missing something.
Right, yeah. It simulates every single fight 10,000 times, factoring in grappling advantages and recent performances, so we get a clearer picture of, how these matchups might actually play out.
Okay, before we really get into it, can you help me understand this whole edge concept? It's not just about who's favored.
Right. No, not at all. Think of it this way. The odds makers, they set lines based on how they see a fighter's chances. So let's say they give a fighter next 200 odds. That means they think that fighter has roughly a 66% chance of winning. That's also what we call the implied probability. And what Tajikbay does is it compares its own win probability to that implied probability. So the difference between those two, that's what we call the edge.
So if Tajikbay thinks a fighter has a better chance of winning than the odds suggest, that's a positive edge. So that could be a good bet.
Yeah, you got it. Of course, it's never really that simple, but a positive edge, it definitely means there might be some value there if you're, feeling lucky.
All right, let's jump into this card. Where do we even begin with a lineup like this?
Well, we got to start with the main event, right? Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland. It's a clash of styles that's got everybody talking.
And what does Tajikbay say about this one? Give me the prediction.
So the model likes du Plessis, gives him a 55% chance to win, with a decision being the most likely outcome.
Yeah.
But here's the interesting part. The odds makers have Strickland as the underdog at plus 165. So that actually gives him a plus 9.91% edge, according to the model.
Wait, so even though du Plessis is predicted to win, Strickland might be the smarter bet. How does that even work?
It's all about how those odds become implied probability. The model, it seems to think du Plessis is the safer pick overall, but the odds on Strickland, they're good enough to create this positive edge. Could be that Strickland's style, it's just tricky enough to cause an upset. Maybe the model's picking up on that.
Okay, I see how this edge thing really adds another layer here. What about the co-main event? Zhang Weili versus Tatiana Suarez. Two powerhouses going at it.
Oh yeah, this one's going to be fireworks. The model's predicting a Zhang victory by TKO with a 65% chance of winning. But even though she's the favorite, there's still a little edge for bettors who pick her at plus 3.46%.
So the model thinks Zhang's going to dominate, but there's still value there for those who want to back the favorite. I'm seeing a pattern here.
Yeah, it seems like it. In this case, it probably comes down to Zhang's takedown defense. Suarez, she's a, phenomenal wrestler. But the model clearly thinks Zhang's striking and her defensive skills, it'll be enough to keep her on her feet.
Okay, got to talk about the heavyweights. Justin Tafa versus Talison Teixeira. What's the model's take on this clash of the titans?
This one's kind of interesting. The model's calling for a Tafa win by KO, 52% chance of victory. But here's the twist. The odds makers, they have him as the underdog. And that translates to a big plus 8.90% edge, according to Tajikbay.
Now, that's what I'm talking about, a potential upset with a pretty big edge. What's the model seeing that the odds makers might be missing?
Well, Tough is known for his knockout power, and he's got the home crowd advantage in this one. The model seems to think he might just catch Teixeira, even if Teixeira is, technically the favorite on paper.
All right, so we've got a dominant favorite with an edge in Zhang. We've got a potential value play in Strickland and a possible upset with Tafa. I'm already hooked. Let's keep going. Jimmy Crute versus Rodolfo Bellato.
For this one, the model's leaning towards Bellato, predicting a decision victory with a 52% chance of winning. But when we look at the odds, things get a little weird. Crute actually has a slight edge, plus 3.56% at plus 120, while Bellato has a negative edge, negative 7.18% and negative 140.
So even though Bellato's slightly favored, the odds might actually be better for Crute. This is crazy. What's causing that difference?
The model probably likes Bellato's grappling control. It's been a key to his recent wins. But Crute's odds, they're likely influenced by his underdog status. And, the fact that he's coming off a layoff, the model might be weighing those things differently.
This proves you can't just look at who's predicted to win. The odds and the edge, they tell a whole other story. All right, next up, Jake Matthews versus Francisco Prado.
Matthews is the clear favorite here. The model gives him a 58% chance of winning by decision. But as you might expect with a favorite, the betting odds, they kind of reflect that, giving him a negative 10.75% edge.
So not much value there. Seems like a pretty straightforward pick, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Matthews' experience and the home advantage are probably the main things driving the model's prediction here. It'll be interesting to see if Prado can pull off the upset, but the model's not giving him much of a chance.
Okay, time for the prelims. Jack Jenkins versus Gabriel Santos to kick things off. What's the model saying?
The model is going with Santos by submission, giving him a 55% chance of victory. But wait, there's another twist here. Jenkins, even though he's the underdog, he's got a plus 7.26% edge.
Another upset brewing. This whole card is going to be full of surprises. What's giving Jenkins the edge?
Santos, his grappling's definitely his strength. That's probably why the model favors him. But that positive edge for Jenkins, it suggests the odds makers might be undervaluing his own grappling defense or maybe something else in his game.
This is getting good. Let's move on to Tom Nolan versus Vyacheslav Borshev. What's the story here?
Models siding with Borshev, predicting a TKO victory with a 52% chance of winning. But when we check those edges, Nolan has a tiny plus 1.49%, and Borshev sitting at a negative 5.45%.
So the model sees it as a close fight, but thinks Borshev's striking will win it in the end.
Exactly. The model seems to think Borshev's power and aggression, it'll eventually be too much for Nolan, even though the fight looks pretty close on paper.
Okay, what's next on this wild ride? Wang Kong versus Brenner Brazil is coming up. I'm on the edge of my seat already.
Oh, this one's where things get really interesting. The model's predicting a Wang victory by decision with a 60% chance of winning. But here's where the alarm bells go off. Wang is a huge favorite at negative 425, and that gives her a negative edge of negative 22.14%. But then Brazil, she's got a massive plus 18.26% edge as a plus 315 underdog.
Hold on, a negative edge that big for the favorite and a positive edge that huge for the underdog. Are we looking at a massive upset here?
It sure looks like it. This is like a textbook example of where the model sees a big difference between its prediction and what the odds makers are saying.
Okay, we got to break this down. What's the model seeing in Brazil that makes it think she has a much better chance than the odds are showing?
It's tough to say without really getting into the model's calculations, but it could be that Brazil has some advantages, like style-wise, that the odds makers aren't considering. Maybe her fighting style just matches up well against Wang, or maybe there's something in her recent fights that the model's picking up on.
This is incredible. We're only halfway through the card, and we've already got a potential upset with Tafa, a close fight with those interesting odds in the Crupilato matchup, and now this crazy difference in the Wang-Brazil fight.
And we're just getting started. This card is going to be a roller coaster.
You said it. Okay,
Yeah.
Keep it moving. Colby Thickness is going up against Alexandra Topuria next. What's the model saying about this one?
The model really likes Topuria in this matchup, predicts a TKO victory with a 60% chance of winning, but again, the odds tell a different story. Thickness has a strong plus 15.90% edge as a plus 300 underdog, while Topuria's edge is negative 20.58% as the negative 450 favorite.
So we have another situation where the favorite has a big negative edge and the underdog has a big positive edge. Is this becoming a trend?
It's starting to look that way. It shows that the model's finding specific fights where the odds might not be showing the real chances of winning.
I'm hooked on this edge concept. It's like a whole new way to analyze fights. Let's keep going. Jonathan McCullough versus Kevin Jusit is next.
The model's picking Jusit to win by decision, 55% chance of victory. Now for the odds, Mykov has a plus 9.29% edge at plus 195, while Jusit has a negative 12.74% edge at negative 240.
So the model's leaning towards Jusit's striking, but McCullough might be worth a look for those who like a good underdog.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. The model seems to see a way for McCullough to win, even though Jusit's slightly favored overall.
All right, the hits keep on coming. Cody Steele is going up against Rong Zhu next. Prediction for this one?
This is close, according to the model. It predicts a Zhu victory by TKO, but it's a 50-50 split on the win probability. The betting odds tell a different story, though. Steele is the favorite with a negative 19.69% edge, while Zhu has a plus 16.90% edge as the underdog.
So the model says it's the toss-up, but the odds say Steele's the clear favorite. What's happening here?
Maybe the odds makers are putting too much weight on Steele's strengths or not enough on Zhu's potential. The model, on the other hand, seems to think Zhu has a real shot at the upset.
We're down to the final two fights of the prelims. Hyun Sung Park versus Nyam Jargal Tumendembrel. What's the model's verdict?
The model likes Park in this one. Predicts a decision victory with a 55% chance of winning. Looking at the odds, Park is at negative 290 with an edge of negative 18.33%, while Tumendembrel has a plus 15.15% edge at plus 235.
So the model's putting its money on Park's technical skills, but Tumendembrel's got that positive edge that's hard to ignore.
Yeah, that's right. The model clearly favors Park, but the odds are saying Tumendembrel might be worth a look if you're looking for a possible upset.
And finally, Quillen Salkeld versus Anshul Jubli to round out the prelims. Model's take on this one.
Models predicting Salkild to win by decision, 55% chance of victory. But hold on, because the odds for this fight are crazy.
I'm ready. Let's hear it.
Salkild's a big favorite at -450 with a big negative edge of -25.95%. And then Jubilee, he's a huge underdog at +325 with a massive +21.47% edge.
Wow, that is a huge difference. What is the model seeing in Jubilee that makes it think he has a way better chance than those odds are showing?
It's impossible to know for sure without really digging into the model's calculations, but it's clear that Tajikbay is seeing something in Jubilee's fighting style, maybe his recent performances or even some things that are hard to measure that the odds makers just aren't seeing.
Okay, so we've gone through the entire card, and my mind is blown. Potential upsets everywhere, value bets popping up all over the place, and some seriously strange differences between what the model says and what the betting odds say.
This is what I love about these models. They give you a whole new way to look at fights, and they often find these hidden gems you might not see otherwise.
Absolutely. All right, let's take a quick break to process all this, and then we'll come back and really dig into some of these matchups.
Sounds good to me.
All right, we are back and ready to break down some of these crazy matchups on this UFC 312 card. After going through all those predictions and edges, my head's spinning. There are so many potential upsets and value bets, I don't even know where to begin.
Well, why don't we focus on those fights where Tajikbay sees the biggest differences between its predictions and what the odds makers are saying? The ones with those crazy edges we talked about?
Yeah, perfect. Let's start with the underdogs that are catching the model's attention. Those fighters who might have a better chance than the odds makers think.
One that jumps out right away is Bruna Brazil. The model gives her only a 40% chance of beating Wang Kong, but she has a huge plus 18.26% edge according to the odds. That's a big sign that something might be wrong with how the odds makers are seeing this fight.
So even though the model doesn't think she's going to win, it's saying she might be a lot tougher than her underdog status suggests.
Exactly. Remember, this model looks at all sorts of things. Fighting styles, recent performance, even things like a fighter's heart and determination. So Brazil might have some advantages that the odds makers aren't seeing.
When you put it that way, it makes you wonder if there's something about Brazil's style that could give Wang trouble. Maybe she's got some sneaky submissions, or her striking is more powerful than people think.
Yeah, those are good points. We don't have all the data that the model has, but this difference is definitely worth looking into if you're thinking about betting on this fight.
It's like the model's telling us, hey, don't count this underdog out. She might have some surprises. Right? Who else is the model liking as an underdog?
Another interesting one is Rong Zhu, who's fighting Cody Steele. The model predicts a 50-50 split for this one, which means it basically sees it as a toss-up. But Zhu has a plus 16% edge based on the odds, so he might be undervalued by the odds makers.
So a real coin flip fight where the underdog has a big edge. That's a recipe for an upset.
For sure. And it shows why it's important to look beyond just the win probabilities when you're analyzing fights. The odds and the edges can tell you where the real value is.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So if I'm looking for a high-risk, high-reward bet, Zhu might be the guy. But what if I want an even bigger payout? Is there an underdog with an even larger edge?
You're in luck because Anshul Jubilee, who's going up against Quillan Salkild, fits that description. The model gives him only a 45% chance to win, but the odds makers have him as a big underdog, which gives him a crazy plus 21.47% edge.
Okay, that is a massive edge. What's the model seeing in Jubilee that makes it think he has a way better chance than the odds are showing? Is he some kind of secret weapon that the odds makers haven't figured out yet?
It's hard to say for sure without looking at all the specific things the model's considering, but it's likely that Jubilee has some strengths or some stylistic advantages that the model thinks are more important than the odds makers do. Maybe he's got a unique grappling style or his striking is better than people think.
It's like the model's saying, hey, I know this guy's a big underdog, but don't be surprised if he wins. He's got what it takes.
Exactly. And that just goes to show that these models often see things that humans don't. They don't care about reputation or past performance. They just look at the data.
Okay, so we've got three underdogs that the model is really high on: Brazil, Zhu, and Jubilee. They're all long shots according to the odds,
No.
but the model thinks they have a much better chance of winning than the odds show. It's almost like they've got secret weapons. Is there anything these three fighters have in common? Anything that might explain why the model likes them so much, even though they're underdogs?
That's a really good question. Let's see if we can find a pattern here. Brazil is fighting a striker who's a big favorite in Wang Kong. Zhu is facing a guy in Cody Steele who seems pretty well-rounded. And Jubilee's going up against Quillan Salkild, who looks like he has a solid all-around game. What do these three underdogs have in common?
Well, they're all fighting guys who are supposed to be more well-rounded or who have a clear advantage in one area. Maybe the model is seeing some weaknesses in those favored fighters that the odds makers are missing.
That's a smart observation. It's possible that the model is finding things in the favored fighters' styles or their game plans that the odds makers aren't really seeing. For example, maybe Wang Kong, even though she's got great striking, has a weakness in her takedown defense that Brazil could use. Or maybe Cody Steele, even though he's solid everywhere, doesn't have the power to finish a tough fighter like Zhu.
So it's like the model seeing holes in their armor that the odds makers aren't. That's really cool. So if our listener wants to pick an upset, they should definitely look at these three fighters. They could be the dark horses that nobody expects.
Exactly. And even if they don't win, the fact that they have such big positive edges means they'll probably put up a tougher fight than the odds makers think.
Okay, so we've talked about the underdogs. What about the favorites?
Yeah.
Are there any favorites that the model thinks are really good bets, even if their edges aren't as big as those underdogs we just talked about?
Absolutely. Zhang Weili in the co-main event against Tatiana Suarez is one. The model thinks Zhang's going to win by TKO with a 65% chance, and she even has a small positive edge of plus 3.46%, even though she's the favorite.
So even though she's supposed to win, there's still some extra value there for people who want to bet on her. Interesting. What's giving her that edge?
It's probably because of Zhang's improved takedown defense, and her overall striking. Suarez is a really good wrestler, but the model thinks Zhang will be able to keep the fight standing and land some big shots.
It sounds like the model really likes Zhang's striking and her ability to stop Suarez from taking her down. That makes sense when you look at Zhang's recent fights. She's been looking really sharp. So if our listener wants a relatively safe bet with a little extra value, Zhang might be the one.
Yeah, I think that's a good take. Of course, there's always a chance of an upset in MMA, but the model definitely sees Zhang as the better fighter in this matchup.
Okay, so we've got those three underdogs we talked about, and we've got a solid favorite with a small edge in Zhang Weili. Is there anything else that stands out to you from the model's predictions? Any other fights that you're excited to see or that you think our listeners should watch closely?
You know, I'm really interested to see what happens in the main event between Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland. The model thinks du Plessis is going to win, giving him a 55% chance of winning by decision. But Strickland has that positive edge of plus 9.91% as the underdog.
Yeah, that one's a tough one to figure out. Duplessis seems like the safer pick based on what the model says, but Strickland's odds are good enough to make him a potentially good bet. What do you think is going to happen?
It's hard to know for sure. Du Plessis has good grappling, and Strickland is known for being tough and being able to take a lot of damage. It might come down to whether Du Plessis can take Strickland down and control him on the ground, or whether Strickland can survive and keep the fight standing where he might have a slight advantage.
It's a real clash of styles, and the model's having a hard time making a clear prediction. That's what makes this fight so exciting. It really could go either way.
Exactly, and that's why you have to look at everything. The model's predictions, the betting odds, and your own thoughts about the fighter's styles and strengths. There's no magic formula for betting on MMA, but if you look at the whole picture, you have a better chance of making smart decisions.
Okay, so we've got those three underdogs, a solid favorite in Zhang Weili, and a main event that could go either way. I'm starting to feel like I understand this whole edge thing. It's like having a secret weapon.
That's the power of using data. It can give you a new way of looking at things and help you find opportunities that you might not have seen before.
All right, we've covered a lot here. What do you say we take a quick break and then come back for some final thoughts and maybe some strategies for our listener?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, we're back for the final round of our UFC 312 deep dive. We've uncovered some serious value bets, potential upsets, and like a whole new way of looking at fight predictions. Thanks to this model, Tajikbay. I gotta say, I'm feeling a lot more informed, maybe even a little dangerous.
Yeah, that's the great thing about, data-driven analysis. It helps you make smarter decisions, whether you're betting on fights or just navigating life.
So as we wrap up, what's the main takeaway for our listener? What should they be thinking about as they watch these fights?
I think the biggest takeaway is understanding how models like Tajikbay work and how they connect with the betting odds. That can be really valuable even if you're not like a big gambler.
So it's about seeing more than just the surface, right?
Right, exactly. It's about understanding that there's often more to the story than what you see at first, whether you're betting on fights, making investments, or just trying to understand the world. Having a data-driven approach can give you a real advantage.
I like that. It's not just about picking winners. It's about understanding the process, the logic, and maybe the problems of just going with your gut or what everyone else is saying.
Exactly. And it's about being open to new information, new ways of thinking, even if they challenge what you thought you knew.
Speaking of challenging what we thought we knew, we saw a lot of that in this deep dive. From those underdog upsets the model found to the differences between its predictions and the odds. There's always more to learn.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so interesting. The world of MMA is always changing, and so are the ways we use to analyze and understand it.
So for our listener, as they get ready to watch UFC 312, what are some final words of advice? How can they use what we talked about today in their own fight analysis and maybe even their betting?
Okay, first of all, remember that no model is perfect. Upsets happen all the time in MMA. It's unpredictable.
Yeah, it's not like a magic crystal ball or anything.
Right. But what models like Tajikbay can do is give you a good way to analyze things. They can help you find those value bets, see fighters that people might be overlooking, and make you rethink your own ideas about how a fight might go.
It's about using the data
Mhm.
to, make your own understanding better, not to replace it entirely.
Yeah, absolutely. The best bettors and analysts are the ones who combine those data-driven insights with their own fight knowledge, their intuition, and their experience.
It's finding that balance between the numbers and the story.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So to our listener, I'd say go into UFC 312 with an open mind, look at everything, and don't be afraid to question what you think you know.
And most importantly, enjoy the fights.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a wild one.
Well, I want to thank you for taking us on this deep dive. I learned a ton, and I'm sure our listener did too.
Happy to do it. Always enjoy sharing what I've learned.
And to everyone listening, remember to gamble responsibly, do your own research, and keep learning.
Good advice.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep diving deep, and keep those bets coming.